And now, I would love to introduce to you Caitlyn Lyles. Come on up, Caitlyn. She is, been a part of Providence for a long time now. You've probably mainly seen her leading worship on stage, which she's fabulous at that too. But we're going to get to have her talk to us tonight. I'm so glad that you're here, and we're going to be blessed for that. So hand it off, Caitlyn.
Hey. Listen, this microphone makes me feel like Britney Spears. And I told some people that, and so that was what that was. Anyway, hi, I'm Caitlyn Lyles. I go here to Providence. We've been here about 13 years. I sing on the worship team here. I was up here yesterday. And it's way scarier to me to talk to you than to sing to you. So I'm going to sing the whole thing. No, I will not be doing that. Anyway, so a couple things about me. Like I said, I go to Providence. I love it here. I love the community here. I see a lot of faces I do know and some that I don't, and that's super exciting. I'm a nurse practitioner. I work for Children's at Oak Ridge Pediatrics. I'm married. I got some kids, but that is a spoiler in my story, so I'm not going to tell you any more about them just yet, but one of them is over there. And let's see what else. I guess that's pretty much all you need to know. I'm super excited to be here / nervous / feel like I'm going to fall over. So anyway, let's get started. I'm going to recap kind of the names of God that we've gone over so far. And the first one was Yahweh. We kind of focused on Exodus when we did that, and that is the great I am. It's the eternal, infinite being who has no beginning or no ending, just always is, was, and will be, who doesn't rely on anything or anyone, who is unchanging and self-existent, and yet still keeps a covenant with us, his fallen and broken people. That was the name we learned when we started the study this time. The next one was Elyon. We focused some on Daniel, the Most High God. We learned that God is a sovereign king, that he rules over all things and all nations and is in total control of everything that happens. The next one was El Roi, and that was when Sarah spoke to us, and we focused some in Genesis about the God who sees. And yes, he sees everything we do, but also he sees who we can be, who he wants us to be, and he loves us. And tonight we're going to focus on Yahweh Ra'ah, the Lord is my shepherd. And of course, one of the most popular things that we hear when the Lord is shepherd is probably Psalm 23, as we know. So I'm going to read it to you. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Have you ever noticed that we use that specific scripture as a big comforter in times of great trial? That when people are facing death, when people are facing trials, that is the one we seem to really go to. That, and of course, the promise of Jesus, our Savior, and you're uniting in heaven. So basically the rest of the Bible too. But we really do seem to use that a lot in times of trial. And of course, David was the writer of that. And we, of course, know a lot about David, but he was one of the greatest rulers and kings of Israel, as we know. But he also was the youngest child in his family and thus responsible to tend to the sheep in his family. He was responsible for that. And so I think it's kind of interesting that the way that he wrote is in the way that he can relate. And I think we do that a lot. When we explain things, we kind of explain things in the way that we can relate to it. And that's how David could do it. He understood the role of a shepherd. He understood that, and the way he describes the Lord as his shepherd, I could kind of deduct from that he was a really good shepherd, that he really cared for the sheep and met their needs and tended to them. So that's kind of the backstory on that. So let's have some fun and talk about sheep for a minute. I don't mean to make it awkward, but we're the sheep. I'm just going to spoiler alert that. We're the sheep. No offense, don't be offended, don't leave, but I'm going to tell you things about actual sheep, okay? I'm going to read them. So they're super dumb. Not you, the sheep. They're helpless, and they get scared super easily. They have very little self-defense and will walk directly into danger. I've never done that. It makes me think of Chad and the waterfall jumping story yesterday. That made my stomach hurt so bad. I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, So they won't even try to run from fear. They kind of freeze. They don't even really cry out. They also do what all the other sheep are doing. If one gets scared and run, they just like turn around and run too. They don't even know what's happening. They definitely need a shepherd to guide them. They're super stubborn. If they're left on their own, they will go the wrong way, eat the wrong food, and drink the wrong water. And if the shepherd doesn't lead them, are you awkward yet? Am I talking? I'm not talking about you. If the shepherd doesn't lead them to new pastures, they literally will live in a rut, and they will literally eat grass right over a cliff if the shepherd doesn't direct them to a safe place to do that. They get turned over and stuck on their backs. It's called being cast down, and they literally will die there if the shepherd doesn't turn them over. They also, gross, they get pests inside their noses that lay eggs, and they will literally hurt themselves or kill themselves bashing their head against stuff to relieve the discomfort. So the shepherd has to put oil. I know, Jessica, I didn't write this. I didn't write this part. So anyway, they put oil inside their nose to prevent that. So the shepherd literally has to keep them from messing things up for themselves. I mean, that does not sound like me. It does. So anyway, if you think about it, although, I mean, I'm not trying to be so silly, but really, God shepherds us. The Lord literally leads us because we straight up can't do it without him. We make mistakes, but we would make really bad choices if we didn't trust the Lord to lead us. We're sheep, basically. Okay, so a big thing that I'm doing tonight is talking about the Lord as my shepherd in my life, but we could go on forever about references to that in the Bible. I'm just focusing on a few of them tonight for you. But so one thing we need to really remember is the shepherd never goes behind the flock. He always leads the flock. We've proven when we talked about sheep that sheep need to be led, and so the shepherd does that. Sheep cannot be relied on to lead. They would find themselves in danger. So the shepherd leads the way, which is certainly true in my life. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's my life. It's not made up. It's all real. It's going to sound crazy, so buckle up. But I'm going to tell you about myself. This is when Sherry was like, we come together and we're vulnerable. I'm like, yeah, I'm fixing to be like super vulnerable and tell you some big, big things. Some of you already know the stories. Some of it, maybe not all of it. Some of you went to Providence in that time that I was going through some of those things. But I bet you none of you may know the whole story. So I'm going to share that with you, and I appreciate your kindness as I open up about this because it's super personal. Okay. So I've had a super easy life. That's the end. No, I've had a super easy life as a child. Didn't have to want for anything, raised in a really stable and God-loving Christian home. One thing that I've always struggled with my whole life is that I have health problems. I've always had health problems. I'm one of those people that looks healthy but isn't. And I've always been that way. So when I was a little girl, when I was a baby, I guess I was about 13 months old, my kidney had a problem that they didn't realize, and it ruptured, and I lost most of it. I was in the hospital. I had to have multiple blood transfusions. It was the 80s. We found out later that you could get HIV from blood transfusions. I do not have HIV, but then had to go through a lot of testing because we didn't know about things about HIV back then. And so by the grace of God, don't have that, but had to go through a lot more medical stuff. I thought it was normal to have physicals every month. I thought that was totally normal because that's what I had to do. And as a result of all that surgery, I had a lot of complications with kidney stuff and urinary stuff my whole life. But then life calms down, and I'm used to it. I have a scar from here to here, and that's fine. I don't know any different. I used to tell people it was a shark bite. I don't know. They don't bite in a straight line, so I don't really even know. I don't even know. So time marches on. I go to college. I meet the love of my life, Robbie. We're married. Some of you may know him. We've been married now 15 years. But we got married, and we were so excited. One of the things we always both wanted to be was parents. We want to be parents so bad. And I know, spoiler alert, that I am a parent. But let's talk about what led up to that. So I really wanted to be a mom. I could not wait. He really wanted to be a dad. When we had been married for 1 year, we started trying for a baby, and we got pregnant right away, and it was so exciting. We literally were sitting there thinking about, okay, like, what will it be, a boy or girl? What will they look like? What are we going to name them? We're, like, thinking ahead, late nights rocking them. I could feel the baby on my chest, and I was only pregnant for 2 days before I lost the baby. that I knew of. I was 6 weeks pregnant before I lost that baby. And I'm going to meet that baby one day in heaven, praise God. I am, and I can't wait for that day. But it was, and I know that's really relatable because I know a lot of people face that, but one of the most devastating experiences of my life to lose that baby. I had never hurt like that before, and my husband had never hurt like that before. And what came next, though, was a year and a half of infertility. I actually was working as a nursery nurse, taking care of other people's babies the whole time that I was unable to have my own baby. And it was super hard, but God taught me a lot in that time. There was this one time, I've been doing a little bit of public speaking. God's called me to that since what I'm about to tell you about. But it's so funny. I was like, it's my home church. I'm going to tell them more things than I tell the other people. But one time in the nursery, I was particularly down about not being a mama and the struggle of fertility meds not working. And I opened up this little blankie to do an assessment on a baby, and the baby's shirt said I was worth the wait, and I just lost it. I just lost it. But after a year and a half, which is funny, pause, when you think about that wait, and then I think about people like Sarah in the Bible and like how long she waited, I'm like, Caitlyn, it was like 5 minutes compared to what Sarah did. You know what I mean? But when you're in the moment, when it's your life and you're going through that and you're experiencing something like that, it doesn't feel that way, right? So we kind of, it's not to downplay that because Sarah would, I bet, hold my hand through that anyway, even though she went through what she went through. Do you know what I mean? So finally, after all of that, I did become pregnant again. I found out that I was having a baby girl. And I was super excited. At that ultrasound where you find out what you're having, I also found out that my kidney problem was genetic and that my baby girl had it too, and that she would also be losing her left kidney or the majority of her left kidney. And we were devastated. She awkwardly takes a drink right over there. And we were devastated. So we started planning, like I'm pregnant after all of that kind of trauma of trying to become pregnant, and I'm meeting with surgeons, and we're talking about like these big surgeries we're going to have, how they're going to have to remove over half of her kidneys. She'll be in the hospital. But on November 11th, my Veterans Day baby was born in 2009, and she looked very healthy and wonderful, and she still is. And when she was 7 months old, she had to have a very major and extensive surgery, and it didn't work. So she had her surgery, and it was not successful in fixing her kidney problem. And so we were completely crushed. And I wonder if some of you can relate to handing a baby over to a surgeon and how hard that was. But he prayed with us. He was the most amazing man. But we were totally crushed, totally devastated. Thought life couldn't get any harder than that. Had to plan to have a second surgery that would be much more invasive and much more difficult when she was 2 years old. But she had to grow a little bit before we could do that surgery. So I literally have bullet points on my life because there's so many things I want to tell you. So if I look down, I'm sorry. So next, we have to do fertility meds later for have another child. My daughter Avery is 2, and we become pregnant with my son. We found out he's a boy, he's healthy, he does not have the kidney problems. And I'm having a healthy pregnancy. I got a stomach bug and went into labor. Okay, that's not even a good part of the story, that's a sidebar. So I woke up in the middle of the night when I was 36 weeks, and I promise you, I heard a voice that said, he's coming. And I went, and I got up, and I was just totally panicked, and went to the doctor, and was like 7 centimeters, and had to be checked in to have my son. And so on February 1st, are you looking at pictures? Yeah. February 1st of that year, I want to look too, so I'm just going to be like, February 1st that year, we welcomed Owen William into the world. That was in 2012. And we took a long time trying to get used to what it was like to have 2 kids. That's an adjustment. And we were getting into our stride. Avery was 2, Owen was a newborn. Things were kind of getting into our new normal. So remember, Avery has to have this big surgery that year, and I have this baby. Avery's 2, Owen's 4 weeks old. It's my birthday, February 29th. Yes, that's my real birthday. I am 9 years old, okay? Okay, so trust a 9-year-old to tell you a story. So February 29th in 2012, it came that year, and so I had a newborn baby. My family came over to celebrate. I was nursing my son, and I started having this really intense stomach pain, like abdominal pain, and kind of doubled over, and I stood up and just hemorrhaged, just bled, just hemorrhaged. We called the doctor immediately. She was like, okay, I'm calling in some medication. You take it right now. It should stop it. But if it happens again, you need to go to the hospital, and I'll meet you there. So I took the medicine, stopped the bleeding, went to bed. My husband took the night shift. That's what we call it at my house when someone has to do the night shift at night. And I woke up at 5 in the morning to nurse Owen again. This time, though, I lost 45% of my total blood volume. This time, though, I wasn't responsive anymore on the floor. And this time, my husband had to call 911 because I was no longer responsive. Now, let me tell you, this is a little part that I don't necessarily always share, but like I said, I feel really like the Lord really put on my heart to say certain things today. This is definitely a valley of a shadow of death, as it were. I was not responsive, but I could hear everything. I just couldn't respond to them. And so I just laid there, and at first, you know what? I felt calm and not panicked because I didn't see a light, no loved ones. I didn't see Jesus. So I felt like, as a believer, this isn't it right here because that's not how it works. You know, he don't just leave us to be like, so am I, what, you know. So I just kind of tried to stay with it I'm sarcastic. I'm really sorry. But so I just tried to stay with it by like listening to their conversation. I was humming songs in my head, trying to stay with it. They called, of course, the paramedics came. I went to the hospital where I had 6 blood transfusions because I had lost so much blood. Had a surgery to make the bleeding stop and was recuperating in the hospital. Without really understanding what happened or why or what caused it, I just knew that, we've heard of a postpartum hemorrhage, so I just thought that was kind of what was going on. And I went home, kind of thinking like, I don't really know what happened, but that was horrible. And I was super weak, and I was trying to recover. And I get a phone call on March 9th from my doctor and was like, hey, can you come in here real quick? Bring your husband. Never a good sign. So we go to the hospital, to the doctor's office, which is in the hospital. And I'm waiting, and not one but 2 teary-eyed physicians come in the room, also a bad sign. Plus, they know me. I'm a nurse practitioner, so they know me. And they begin to tell me this story. They begin to say, sometimes when this happens, and I just don't even remember what else they said, and I finally said, they used the word tumor. And I said, are you trying to tell me that I have cancer? And they said, yeah, you do. You do have cancer. We don't know how bad it is yet, but we know that you have it. You have choriocarcinoma. It is a really rare cancer that grew from my son's placenta. Never heard of that because I haven't either until then. So let me tell you a little bit about it. It occurs in 0.02% of pregnancies. Usually, it's a molar pregnancy. That's a whole thing. When the mom has it, the babies only have a 20% survival rate. So my little baby was growing there with cancer, but my little baby's 10 now. Praise God. So I was a very rare cancer. It's a very aggressive cancer. It's considered high risk or low risk based on where it is. I found out that it was all over my lungs, all over. I lit up like a Christmas tree on my CT scan. And as a singer, that is devastating information, obviously. Back then, I didn't sing at Providence yet because I wasn't brave enough. But anyway, so I found out it was all over my lungs, which put me in high-risk category. So if you hear about cancer staging, just so you kind of get an idea of what that's like saying I have stage 3-4 cancer. I was 28 years old. I had a newborn baby, and I had a 2-year-old at home, and I have cancer. And life stopped. It just totally stopped. It just totally stood still. Avery, my daughter, had to have that major kidney surgery, and we just had to postpone it because I was too sick. And so they decided to put off her major surgery until I was better, and I started doing, are you seeing me? Yeah. Those were called snuggle days. So the worst part about having my particular very radioactive chemotherapy regimen that was every single week for 6 months was that I wasn't allowed to touch my children for 48 hours after each infusion. So I was... basically, I had infusions I was like in the hospital for 12-hour infusions over and over, Mondays and Tuesdays, couldn't touch them Wednesdays or Thursdays, newborn and 2-year-old. Could touch them Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then have to do it all over again. It was devastating. I worried about weird things like I was bald, so would my newborn recognize me because your hair is part of what you look like? That kind of thing. If I don't make it, is he even going to remember me? The answer is no. Would my 2-year-old? Probably not. It was devastating to me. My back was totally up against the wall. I was totally in a valley. I don't normally share chemo side effects. But I think we can deduce that they were pretty bad, right? There were agony. I think that's the word that I would best describe what I went through as agony. Pain at which I cannot explain to you because there's not a word really for it. Okay, I feel like being sarcastic and tell you I had to wipe blood off my nose like 11 in Stranger Things, but I don't know how that'll be received, so I won't say it. I'm not going to say it. So, of course, I was bald, which was really, really hard. But my daughter and I wore matching scarves around our heads. She wore little hearts with red lipstick kisses of mine on days where I couldn't touch her. So it was like she was getting kisses from Mommy, and she had a calendar so she knew when Mommy could touch her. My family did this with me. It's like I wasn't the only person doing this, right? We don't ever, as believers, and we don't let people suffer alone. And my family did not let me suffer alone. So I was never alone one single night in the hospital. I was never alone one single day in the hospital. Neither were my children. We took shifts. There was somebody who took me to breakfast in the hospital, and then my husband would come in the evenings, and then this person would come in the... it was like a fine-tuned schedule. We moved in with my parents because I had a newborn and a 2-year-old, and my husband's like, what do I even do? So my family just really came together to help me. So like I said, I had chemo every single week for almost 6 months, and how we fought together as a family. I got to tell you, though, because I'm obviously describing a pretty epic valley, right? So I got to tell you, God is so abundantly clear when there's no distractions. I have one job, and that was to live. And there was this abundant clarity that I can't explain, and I'm so grateful that I experienced it. I remember Chad saying to me, don't you wish you could hear God all the time the way you do right now in this valley? Because I was being forced to be still. I was being forced to be still, and it was pretty interesting. And these are some things that I don't always share, but I will tell you this. I felt like the veil was getting thin between where I was and heaven. When you face death, and I had 2 occasions where I was told that I needed to prepare my family and get my affairs in order. I'm not sure how you even do that. I had incidences one night, because I couldn't touch Avery. I laid on the floor next to her, in her bed, and she was facing the wall, and she said, Mom, I'm supposed to tell you to be brave. She was 2, and I was like, what? And then she said, how come when angels are in the room, their hair, their curls, they always fly in the wind like this? And I was like, oh my gosh. And then she started talking about my uncle who passed away before I was born, like by name. I'm getting chills. Talking about this. God was taking care of my children. I didn't have to do that. I just needed to literally be still. God was showing up at a 2-year-old's little heart and working on her and comforting me because he was comforting her. I swear, there was one time where I was going to go brush my teeth, and I was like, can I be alone for a second? Because that's how much I felt like the presence. It was like, I'm just going to brush my teeth. Like I literally could feel God's presence, and I don't know who else's, but God's presence, and the prayers of everyone. I could tangibly feel them. There was one night in the hospital, I had to have a hysterectomy at 28, and then battle lung cancer, essentially. It was devastating because we had 2 kids, super amazing blessings. I don't misplace that, but we wanted a big family, and that was taken. I was laying in the hospital on one of the nights where I was close to passing away, and my oxygen monitor kept dropping when I would stop breathing. And every time that would happen, a different voice, male, female, different tones would go, Kate, wake up, Kate. And I'd go, and no one was with me. That's God, y'all. It's so cool. I know you're looking at me like, what in the world? But this is so cool how he revealed himself to me when I was nearing death. But God had a much different plan than science did, because statistically I should not be here, but God's never like, oh, but you only had a this %, so he doesn't care about that. And so August 1st, 2012, I was cancer-free by the grace of God. Thank you. Thank you. I'm about to be 10 years cancer-free August 1st, and I cannot wrap my brain around that. Several of the chemo drugs that I was on damaged my voice, so I could hardly even speak then. So any time that I get to be up here is a triumph over that time for me, just so you know. So we talked about how hard that was in cancer, but really when you survive something like that, trying to then, okay, anyway, let's go back to normal is very difficult. It's very difficult once you face trauma. That's trauma. for sure. And so it was really hard to figure out my place and how to be normal and what I wanted to do. I said once, if God allows me to survive this on earth, then I am going to be on mission for him. And so speaking to you is a fulfillment of that promise, and I mean it. Even though I'm scared to death when I'm up here and sharing things that are super personal, when God calls you to something, you don't back down. You do it. And he makes the way the rest. I hope these words aren't mine. I don't want them to be mine. This story is, I'm a character in it, but it's certainly not about me. So time goes on, and we're trying to figure out our normal, and I start feeling this stirring in my heart that my family should grow, but I wasn't sure what that was supposed to look like. I'd never really thought about anything except having my own children, and I wasn't sure what that should look like. I actually really felt that strong longing, but kept that to myself because I was like, I feel like maybe we're supposed to adopt, but I don't want to pressure my husband. I don't want to push him into this, So I kind of kept it to myself, and a year went by of me being like, Caitlyn, you're being ridiculous. You look what you have. It's fine. And then let me tell you this very romantic story. We were at Steak and Shake. And, I think we were just been at Rooms to Go, and then we were at Steak and Shake, and I was about to take a bite out of this burger, and my husband goes, hey, Kate, I think we're supposed to adopt. And I was like, and I started sobbing in a Steak and Shake, like any mature adult would, obviously. I just started bawling because I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? I've been thinking that for so long and blah, 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 blah. So obviously, because we are able-bodied people who are parents, it's going to happen immediately when you get called to do something, right? No. So we filled out roughly 7,000 pieces of paper about our lives to adopt, roughly. Physicals, background checks, fingerprints, literally everything. You even, in the agency that we use, you create a book about your lives, and then these birth moms and hopefully birth dads get to look at them and determine if they would like to meet you or choose you for your family. That's like a blind date from I don't know where. I like long walks on the beach, and I take care of my children, and look, there's my dog. I don't know. It was very scary. So we made this book, and no one looked at our book for 2.5 years. I mean, literally, we were like, oh, we're just having another baby. It's going to be so easy. We're so open. Whatever. God's going to use it. It's on my time, obviously. I'm going to get out of my valley, But we were asked to be still for quite a while with that. But we got the call in June 2019 that a birth mom wanted to meet us. They'd narrowed it down to us and one other family. When we walked in to meet her, that was terrifying. When we went in to meet her, we realized we were meeting not just birth mom, but birth dad, which I cannot tell you what the blessings are. Who are you seeing? Okay, that's Luke. So they chose us. And so obviously it's going to be really easy because they chose us. There'll be nothing weird. It won't be hard at all. That was one of the hardest moments of my life dealing with adoption. So here's the deal. I love Luke's birth parents because God loves them. God made them. They created Luke. There's no Luke without them. However, it was a very bumpy road. Adoption is not something that any party enters into unbroken. Nobody's just casually walking in to place a baby for adoption, nor are they casually walking in to receive a baby. That's not how it works. It's complicated. There were some really hard things. No one thought that we were going to really get to have Luke, but we do have Luke. And so that is our picture the first time I got to hold him in the NICU. He was born with no prenatal care, but he's born, 32 to 34 weeks. So he was early, so he was in the NICU. I hope we realize that I'm wearing a shirt that Ashley from Providence was fundraising, wearing the one that says hope. I don't know if you see that. So that is Luke David Lyles. He was in our home for 6 months before we got to legally adopt him. And he is ours, and he'll be 3 on August 9th of this year. I mean, hair model much? He is the person that I didn't know was missing. He was the person that God had planned for my family that if he had told me, I would have been like, what? He is a part written so perfectly into my life, just like I'm written into his, that God, the author, wrote this story for me. And I feel like if you look at your life as a book, I was 28, okay, when I had cancer. So if I look at myself as a book, and I feel like God would be like, if you just keep reading past chapter 28, it gets so much better. but just keep reading, because your story doesn't end until I put a period at the end of the last sentence, so just keep reading. And Luke David Lyles is part of our family forever by the grace of God. So let's talk about miracles for a minute, because I think sometimes we think of, those are my miracles, spoiler. I think we think sometimes about miracles like biblical ones, and we forget that they're still happening all the time here. You know what I mean? Like, we see these big ones, and then we miss the little ones. These are big to me. I'm going to tell you about them. So that's Avery. Hi. There she is. She's so happy that I pointed at her. So that's Avery. Avery's 12 now. Avery needed another surgery for her kidney because the one didn't work. When we went to go scan, she had something called a VCUG. It's a very invasive procedure. Okay, it's horrendous. We had the procedure to see. They were looking at where to go in to operate and the technique that they were going to have to use. So imagine my surprise when the doctor walked in tears and says this: God has healed your child in your battle with cancer. She no longer needed the surgery. It wasn't even necessary. We could walk away from that battlefield because it was over. And so guess how many times over I would have cancer again if it prevented my child from going through that as a mother? 1 million. It was amazing. Next is Owen in the middle, who is 10 years old. And as I told you, should not be here because of the cancer. But he's healthy, he's amazing, and he doesn't have risks of that. And he's here literally by the grace of God. I did nothing. God did it all. And I got to tell you a funny real quick is I spoke at a church on their Mother's Day service. That was terrifying. And my kids were there, and I said, this is Owen, and he really shouldn't be here except by the grace of God. And somebody leaned over and goes, you shouldn't be here. So I feel like they missed the point, and we'll circle back to that church at another time, right? It was hilarious. I saw him laughing. I was like, but yeah, it was so funny. And then, of course, Luke Lyles, I wouldn't even looked for him. I would have just kept thinking my plan was the right plan, and I just would have kept doing it. I wouldn't have tried. I never even thought about adoption. I always thought adoption was a noble and wonderful thing, but I never even would have looked for Luke. But God was like, hey, I've got something better than you can imagine, and you just kind of need to be in this pasture and lay down by the still water and just wait. And that's hard for me to do. So obviously from that point on, my life has been very easy. I have no problems, and life's great. So anyway, no, I'm just kidding. So I actually face a lot of things. I am a healthy-looking, unhealthy person. Chemo has a lot of long-term side effects, and they're not fun. But I'm here, so I'm not complaining. One of them, namely, is these glasses are so I see one of you because my double vision is so bad from chemotherapy. These are prisms, so I can see one of you. I didn't even wear glasses before I had cancer, and my vision is deteriorating. I'm 38 and have bifocals, so that's great. But also, I always say, it could be worse. It's all small prices to pay. But I have this redheaded friend over there, and she likes to tell me that just because it can be worse doesn't mean your bad stuff's not bad. Hi. And it's okay for you to feel it. And it's true. I mean, I know my other stuff was bad, and so I almost act like I'm guilty if I feel bad about this new thing. It's crazy. It's crazy. I have neuropathy from chemotherapy. That's numbness and tingling that goes down my fingers, my toes, and in my ears. Actually, it's really annoying. And I have a lot of other things. I have a bladder disorder. You don't need to know that, but I have a lot of health problems. I get sick really easily, and it seems like new things pop up all the time. And so that's kind of my general thing. But it's continued to be, I've kind of be honest with you, is that I wanted to end the story of me there. And Sherry's like, but look what you're going through now. Okay? And look how you could use that and tell people that, and it might serve them and glorify God if you do. So here it goes. In the last year and a half, I lost my grandfather. I just lost my uncle. I know it's been a hard couple years for everybody, right? My sister, she's 4 years younger than me and gorgeous. She got pregnant with her first baby and miscarried, and it was far enough along that I, in the night, had to go help deliver the miscarriage. To which she ended up in surgery with a problem. And but by the grace of God, she does have a little boy now. She had a little boy named Jack, and he is he's 10 months old. But when he was just a few months old in January, we found out my sister has multiple sclerosis. We don't have any family history of multiple sclerosis, but she was feeling numbness in her legs and got really bad, and so she now, the rest of her life, looks like battling MS. which puts us at risk of MS, obviously, as a family. In February, anybody go to the women's retreat? Right here? Hi. So in February, I was doing the women's retreat music, and I was super excited, and God knew I needed that more than I knew that I needed that, because in the middle of that, I was going through testing for MS and something called myasthenia gravis because I have trouble swallowing food sometimes, and my vision is getting worse quickly, and I sometimes smile with more of one side of my face than the other. So I went through extensive and expensive testing for myasthenia gravis. There are some people in this room that super loved on me during that time. Thank you. And I do not have myasthenia gravis, but which is an amazing, by the grace of God, thing. But what I was told is, hey, that's chemo damage, and we can't really help you. These are things that you're going to be dealing with forever, and we don't know if they're going to get worse. In that time, I was diagnosed with 3 new things. And that's just how life is for me now. Chemo is your mean friend because it can do that to you, but sometimes there's long-term side effects. So I was diagnosed with asthma. Makes sense. I had cancer in my lungs. It makes sense, right? That's okay. I can manage that with medication. I was diagnosed with muscle or vocal cord dysfunction, which means my vocal cords spasm and close my airway. This makes it very hard to sing to you on Sunday mornings. Very hard. And then the third thing that I was diagnosed with is muscle tension dysphonia. And what that means is my vocal cords don't work at certain frequencies anymore. It's progressive, it becomes hoarse, and it's permanent. So at some point, I won't be singing to you anymore, and it's devastating. But that point's not today, and God knows when that is, and he can heal or deal. That's what we're going to do. And so it's true. I was diagnosed with that. So after I sing, like on Sunday, I'm super hoarse for the rest of the day. It's like that for now. I can manage that. But it's going to get worse, and I know it. And so if you were at the retreat, you saw me totally break down over that because I had just found out about it, that this was permanent. And I had planned all this music, and I had planned Thy Will Be Done. I don't know if you know that song. Oh, that was really hard, and I just wept, and I don't do that. I know I'm like telling you this really hard story and not crying, and it's weird. But it's not that I'm not feeling it. It's that I just go into this, it's like a survivor mode that I've learned how to do, and I can't undo it sometimes when I want to do that. But I'm devastated. That music, singing is a joy for me. But God will continue to use that because he gave it to me, and if I can't anymore, there's more purpose for me than that. I'm not just somebody who sings on Sundays, right? So that's something I'm dealing with now. Also in February, the week before retreat, my husband lost his job. And have had some trouble landing another one. We had been without an income from February to May, to where I had to step up and go back to work. I was staying at home with little Lukey, and I had to go back to work full-time after being home for several years, and it's been really hard. It's been a really hard transition. My hat's off to you all that have been doing it for a long time, because it's difficult. And I don't know how to make it work, and I'm working on it. I've only been back to work since the end of May, but I'm working on it. But I feel like God has a big purpose of using me in what I do, which is taking care of children at Oak Ridge Pediatrics. So that's okay. I'm still okay. I'm just in a valley. So I would like to tell you that that's the end of the valley. It's not. There will be more. But even in this one, Luke, who was born early, had some complications from delivery. We're in the middle of testing him for some things because he's very delayed, and none of them are good, and all of them are permanent. So I ask that you pray for my son Luke because we have a journey ahead of us. And so, I just need to breathe. It's been a really hard life, but that's okay because it's also been really beautiful and awesome. And God is still God, and nothing I told you about, nothing I explained to you just knocked God off his throne. He's not like, oh my gosh, what do we do with that? He's very, very aware of everything we struggle with. And a long time, I didn't really share my story because I felt kind of unrelatable, but that's not true. We all know how hard it is in our lives. It looks different on everybody. It looks different on what we face, but it's okay because God is not knocked off his throne. He's not shocked. He's not surprised. He wrote the whole thing. You can lean into that pretty good, right? So David refers to God as Yahweh Ra'ah because he wants the kind of relationship where God leads and all we have to do is follow, right? And God's voice comes to us clear, But sometimes it feels drowned out, and it's actually, for me anyway, by the good things. Have you ever noticed that? When life's going really good, do you take time for your quiet time and to pray and to... If you do, I'm really happy for you. It's actually a challenge for me, and I'm sure a lot of people. When my back was against the wall, and I told you everything felt so clear. I could just hear God. I could just feel God. There were no distractions. But then when life's going really well, and I have this fun thing to go to, and we're planning a beach trip, and we're doing this and this, are you stopping to feel God and hear God? Or are you like me when you pray a million thoughts, just like, it's so annoying, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one. Okay. But that happens to me a lot. And it's hard. And so what God calls us to do is to listen to him and to seek him and to seek his voice. In 1 Kings 19, 4 through 13, God is speaking to Elijah, and he really speaks it to him in very different ways. And basically what we learn in that is that God's voice isn't always a strong wind or an earthquake or a fire. Sometimes it's gentle. Sometimes it's a gentle breeze. Sometimes it's a soft voice. It's never not there. Even when we're like, where are you? He's like, hello, I'm right here. I'm right here. God's always with us and always present. So, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time. We're going to talk pastures and valleys, right? We have a hard time, for me anyway, pastures, just to be still and let him make time in my life. I have to lay down in green pastures and be led by quiet waters. Doesn't that sound amazing? Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? Because we have to work, and I have to make a click list, and this kid has practice, and this, commitment is here, and all blah, blah, blah. And God's like, hang on. Let me lead you in this stillness. How many times in the Bible, think about how many times we hear, be still, be still, be still, be still. In the quiet, wait, be still. And yet we're still never still. And I'm going to tell you, I have a really hard time just being still. And I think maybe it's because sometimes when you face anything or look at anything, you think you got to handle it. I got to fix it. I got to do this one thing. But God's like, hang on. I've got it. Let's be still together so you can experience me. That's where God can really restore our souls, don't you think? And so we are called to lie down in the green pastures. And let's talk about valleys, okay? But in Psalm 23, verses 4 and 5, it tells us that God does not actually eliminate difficulties in our lives. Rather, he walks with us in the valleys and literally armors us up with everything that we need to go through the valleys. That's kind of where God can do a lot of his best work, when we're in our most vulnerable place, right? So I'm going to read verse 4 and 5, how it's actually written. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Do you know what we think it should say? Even though I literally will never walk through the valley of shadow of death because nothing is hard and I don't need armor, you prepare a table for me with my besties and everything's great. Well, but think about it. Are you not? I know. Oh, my daughter's probably so embarrassed. But seriously, think about it. That's how we wanted to say. We wanted to be like, okay, well, I love Jesus, so life's going to be super easy. I'm not going to face anything because God will take it all away and all that stuff. It's literally, if you have ever picked up your Bible and opened like any page, you will see that stuff gets hard. You're not supposed to, we don't get along with everybody. If we did, there wouldn't be talking about enemies in the Bible. We wouldn't be talking about that. We wouldn't be talking about difficulties and valleys of the shadow of death. No, because if life was perfect here, we would have literally nothing to long for in heaven. Nothing. Right? God doesn't promise to take every problem away. No. God promises to walk with us through every single problem, every single trial, everything you face. When you think you're alone, spoiler, you're not. God is with you with all that. Also, he empowers you with everything you need to get through what you're going through. And this was hard for me at first, but no matter what it is that you're going through, whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, whether it's mourning, whether it's grief, it all glorifies God. All of it. I didn't, and that's something, if someone said that to me when I had cancer, I'd be like, cool. How? What? But now I can see when you look back at something, like I used to think to myself afterward, I'm never going to be the same. I'm literally never going to be the same. Now I'm like, thank goodness I'm never going to be the same because of what God can do. And I hope that everything I do glorifies him. I hope that that's true. And I know you hope that's true for you too. And we can allow that to let God have those pastures where we lie and be still, where he can teach us those things and restore our souls, that we're empowered. We're not unarmed when we face stuff because we're empowered because we have Jesus. So pray for those who don't, because they're not empowered. And that's really scary and hard. Speaking of that, Jesus really inserts himself into the conversation of sheep and shepherds. He almost picks up where David left off. And one thing, I made my notes, and Sherry gave me her old notes, and I was reading over them, and she said this: if we let God guide us and know that he calls us by name and we are his, then he will actually use us to help him chase down the other sheep that need to know him. Yes, you little sheepy, it's not about just your journey. It's also our job to go get those lost sheep and help show them the gospel and show them Jesus and bring them back, right? Because we're doing God's work when we do that. In John 10, 27 through 29, it says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give eternal life to them, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. No one is able to. Not your hurt, not your anger, not your conflict that you can't get through, not that death that you can't get over that happened, not your cancer, not your illness, not your divorce, not your sadness. God's actually big enough for all of that. He can handle all of it. You don't want to not tell God how you really feel about stuff because, spoiler, he knows. So come to him with that, right? He's big enough. He's called you. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to be like, if I'm like, God, I remember my cancer, I said, I'm mad at you. Why? I don't want to do this. Do you think God was like, ow, that hurt my feelings? No, he can really understand you and he can really handle it because he's God. You're his. He loves you. I love my children, so I want to know how they're feeling. Same goes for God. And actually, my feelings don't get on God's nerves the way sometimes my kids' feelings get on my nerves sometimes. But it's true. It's very, very true. So back in biblical times, when shepherds traveled with their sheep, when they would go long distances, they would all the shepherds would put their sheep all in this one huge pen, kind of intermingled herds, as it were. But when it was time to go, a shepherd just had to walk in there and call out to his sheep, and they actually recognized his voice and would come to him. If sheep can do it, so can we, right? We will hear his voice because we love him and we know him. We will recognize his voice and we'll go to him because we are his. We are called the end, right? And that way we know that no matter what we go through, we don't have to be afraid because we are claimed, we are his. When Jesus taught us how to pray, he taught us with the Lord's Prayer. He said, give us this day our daily bread. He didn't say our weekly bread, our yearly bread, our monthly bread, because he gives us what we need to get through each day as it comes. We're not expected to know how to do what's next. We're expected to trust him as our rod and our staff and our armor. So Jesus is Yahweh. He's the unchanging, eternal I am. And Jesus is El Roi. He sees everything and knows you and loves you. And Jesus is Elyon. He is the sovereign king. And Jesus is Yahweh Ra'ah, the good shepherd who laid down his life for you. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for this opportunity, Lord, to just be open, to share what you've done in my life, Lord, to reflect with these women on the fact that you are a shepherd, Lord, that you lead us, that you guide us, that we need to learn, Lord. Teach us to be still. Teach us to lie down in green pastures, Lord. Help us to let you lead us beside still waters. And help us to never forget that you armor us in the valley, that we are never alone. And there is no need to be afraid because of you, God. And if anyone doesn't know that tonight, if anyone doesn't understand that, if they're hearing that for the first time, Lord, speak right into their heart. Help them to hear you. Help us to always hear you. And be with whatever journey each woman in this room is facing right now. Whatever it is, God, help them hear your voice. We love you, Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, so I picked out a song. That was really hard as a music person. I picked Hold On to Me by Daigle. I don't know if you've heard that song, but I love it. And it's just remember, you're not actually asking God to hold on to you. He already is. It's like we're being reminded, oh, God, hold on to me. Help me to feel you. Help me to feel you in the pastures. Help me to feel you in the valleys. That's kind of how I was thinking of this song when I chose it. So I would love for you to listen to it. And then I've got some discussion questions if you would like to talk to them at your table. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.